So you might have heard the news that the ATF pistol brace rule has been thrown out, and you're probably thinking, that's it, we won, the fight is over, right? Well, not exactly. Today, I'm going to explain why this battle is far from finished and why organizations like Gun Owners of America and the state of Texas are refusing to back down even after what looks like a major victory. This is something that every gun owner in America needs to understand, because what happens next could determine whether your pistol brace remains legal not just today, but 10 years from now, under a completely different administration. Let's start with what actually happened. The Trump Department of Justice recently made a huge move in the match case over at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. They dropped their appeal completely. What does that mean? It means the Biden ATF's pistol brace rule, the one that would have turned millions of law-abiding gun owners into felons overnight, is officially done. Judge O'Connor's nationwide vacatur, which threw out the rule entirely, is now fully in effect across the entire country. No more rule, no more registration requirements, no more threats of turning your braced pistol into a short-barreled rifle that requires a tax stamp and NFA registration. On paper, this looks like a total win for the Second Amendment community. And because of this development, we've seen multiple pistol brace cases around the country start to settle or get dismissed entirely. Courts have been saying the same thing over and over. If the rule doesn't exist anymore, then there's no case to fight. The ATF itself has admitted in several cases that the rule has been vacated, so judges are closing these cases left and right. It makes sense, right? Why keep fighting over a rule that's already been thrown in the trash? This is where most people think the story ends. Rule gone, cases dismissed, everyone goes home happy. But here's where things get interesting and a little bit concerning. Gun Owners of America and the state of Texas are not letting their case get dismissed. They're pushing forward. They're not satisfied with just having the rule thrown out. They want something much more powerful. They want a permanent injunction against the ATF. Now you might be asking, why? If the rule is already gone, why keep fighting? What's the point? Well, this is where you need to understand the real game that's being played here, and it's a game that goes way beyond just one rule or one court decision. The core issue is this. The rule was struck down on procedural grounds. What does that mean? It means the court said the ATF didn't follow the proper process under the Administrative Procedure Act when they made the rule. They didn't give proper notice. They didn't consider public comments correctly. They rushed it through. So the court threw it out because of how it was done, not necessarily because of what it said. And that's a huge distinction. The court never actually ruled on whether the ATF's interpretation of the National Firearms Act was right or wrong. The court never said that a pistol with a brace is definitely not a short-barreled rifle under the NFA. They just said the ATF screwed up the rulemaking process. So here's the problem. Even though the rule is gone, the ATF can still argue that under their interpretation of the actual NFA statute, a pistol with a brace is a short-barreled rifle. They don't need a rule to say that. They can just enforce the law as they interpret it. And that's exactly what Gun Owners of America and Texas are worried about. The ATF could turn around tomorrow and start enforcing this interpretation without a formal rule, just by saying this is what the law means. They could go after manufacturers, retailers, or individual gun owners and say, you're in violation of the National Firearms Act, not because of a rule, but because of the statute itself. Now, before we go any further, if you're finding this information valuable and you want to stay informed about critical Second Amendment issues like this, do me a favor and hit that like button right now. It helps this video reach more people who need to hear this message. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an update on what's happening with your gun rights. These are the kinds of details the mainstream media won't tell you, so make sure you're plugged in here. All right, let's keep going. There's another massive reason why GOS in Texas want that permanent injunction, and it has everything to do with future administrations. Right now we have the Trump DOJ, and they've made it clear they're not interested in enforcing this rule or going after pistol braces. But what happens in 4 years? What happens in 8 years? What if another anti-gun administration takes power? Administrations change, policies change, political priorities change. And if there's no permanent injunction in place, a future ATF under a different president could pick this fight right back up. They could issue a new rule, or worse, just start enforcing their interpretation of the NFA without even bothering with a rule at all. A single district court ruling, even a nationwide one, doesn't create the kind of strong legal precedent that binds future government action. It's a win, but it's not a permanent shield. A permanent injunction, on the other hand, is much stronger. It's a court order that specifically prohibits the ATF from doing something, not just now, but going forward. It creates a legal barrier that future administrations would have to overcome in court before they could go after pistol braces again. That's the kind of protection that Gun Owners of America and Texas are fighting for. They want to make sure this issue is settled once and for all, not just paused until the political winds shift again. And here's something even more disturbing. There have been reports, and these are concerning reports, that even after the rule was vacated, the ATF has still tried to enforce actions against pistol braces. Not openly under the rule, because they can't do that anymore, but using their interpretation of the NFA. This is exactly the kind of sneaky, backdoor enforcement that Second Amendment advocates have been warning about for years. The ATF says one thing publicly, but then quietly tries to do the same thing under a different legal theory. It's enforcement by interpretation instead of enforcement by regulation. And if they're doing it now, imagine what they could do under a less friendly administration. So where does the case stand right now? Well, the court hasn't declared the case moot yet, which is actually good news for GOA in Texas. The judge has said that more briefing is needed. The court wants the ATF to file a motion to dismiss, and then gun owners of America and Texas will have the chance to respond and argue why the case should continue and why a permanent injunction is necessary. This is a critical stage. The arguments that get made in these briefs could determine whether we get the permanent protection or whether this issue is left open for the ATF to exploit in the future. The outcome of this case is absolutely critical, and I can't stress that enough. If gun owners of America and Texas win and get that permanent injunction, the ATF will be permanently blocked from using either the rule or their interpretation of the NFA to go after pistol braces. It would set a precedent that protects gun owners not just today, but for years and decades to come. It would be a barrier that future administrations would have to fight through in court, and that's a huge deterrent. It makes it much harder for anti-gun bureaucrats to just flip a switch and start persecuting millions of Americans over a piece of plastic on their firearms. But if the case gets dismissed, if the court says this is moot and there's nothing left to decide, then that door stays wide open. The ATF keeps its ability to interpret the NFA however it wants. A future administration could pick this fight right back up. They could issue a new rule with better procedure. They could just enforce their interpretation without a rule. And gun owners would be right back where we started, facing the same threats, the same uncertainty, and the same potential for millions of people to become felons overnight just because some bureaucrat decided a brace makes your pistol into a rifle. This is why the work of organizations like Gun Owners of America is so important. They're not just fighting for a win today. They're fighting for permanent protection. They're thinking 5 steps ahead. They're looking at the long game. And that's exactly the kind of strategic thinking the Second Amendment community needs if we're going to preserve our rights not just for ourselves, but for our kids and grandkids. The ATF has shown over and over again that they will push the boundaries of their authority as far as they possibly can. They will reinterpret laws. They will issue rules that go beyond what Congress intended. And they will do it again and again unless they are stopped by the courts with clear, permanent, binding orders. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. Imagine you're a gun owner who bought a pistol brace legally. Maybe you bought it 5 years ago. Maybe you bought it last month. You followed all the laws. You did everything right. And then one day, the ATF decides that the piece of equipment you legally purchased is now illegal. And you're a felon unless you register it, destroy it, or turn it in. That's not how the law is supposed to work in America. You don't get to change the rules after the fact and turn law-abiding citizens into criminals. But that's exactly what the ATF tried to do with this rule. And it's exactly what they could try to do again if we don't get permanent legal protection in place. And here's the thing. This isn't just about pistol braces. This is about the power of unelected bureaucrats to reinterpret laws and regulations to fit their political agenda. Today, it's pistol braces. Tomorrow, it could be triggers, magazines, or anything else they decide they don't like. The precedent that gets set in this case will have ripple effects across the entire firearms regulatory landscape. If the courts let the ATF get away with this kind of overreach, it sends a message that they can do it again with something else. But if the courts slam the door shut with a permanent injunction, it sends the opposite message. It tells the ATF and every other federal agency that there are limits to your power, and the courts will enforce those limits. If you're still watching, thank you for sticking with me through this detailed breakdown. I know this stuff can get complicated, but it's so important to understand what's really happening behind the headlines. If you're getting value from this content, please take a second right now to share this video with your friends, your family, your shooting buddies, anyone who cares about the Second Amendment. The more people who understand what's at stake, the stronger our community becomes. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, because I'll be following this case closely and bringing you updates as soon as they happen. So what should you take away from all of this? First, yes, the ATF pistol brace rule has been vacated, and that's a big win. You can celebrate that. But second, the fight is not over. Gun owners of America and Texas are still in court pushing for a permanent injunction, and that fight matters just as much, if not more, than the initial victory. Because without that permanent injunction, the threat isn't gone. It's just paused. And third, this case is about more than just pistol braces. It's about setting boundaries on federal agency power and making sure that unelected bureaucrats can't just rewrite the law whenever they feel like it. The ATF has a long history of overreach. They've gone after bump stocks. They've redefined what a firearm is. They've tried to regulate 80% lowers and unfinished receivers. They've pushed the boundaries of their authority over and over again. And every time the Second Amendment community has had to fight back in court. These battles are exhausting and expensive, but they're necessary. And the reason organizations like Gun Owners of America keep fighting is because they know that if we give an inch, the ATF will take a mile. If we let them get away with reinterpreting the law to ban pistol braces, they'll do the same thing with the next item on their list. Right now, we're in a moment where the political environment is more favorable to gun rights than it has been in a while. But that won't last forever. Politics is cyclical. Administrations change. And when they do, the legal protections we put in place today will be the shields that protect our rights tomorrow. That's why this case is so important. That's why GOA and Texas are refusing to let it be dismissed. They're thinking ahead. They're playing the long game. And if they succeed in getting that permanent injunction, it will be one of the most significant Second Amendment victories in recent history, even if it doesn't get the headlines it deserves. One more thing I want to mention, and this is something that doesn't get talked about enough. The ATF's behavior in all of this shows a fundamental disrespect for the rule of law. They issued a rule that was so poorly constructed it got thrown out in court. They rushed it through without proper procedure. And even after it was vacated, there are reports that they tried to keep enforcing it under a different legal theory. That's not how government agencies are supposed to operate in a constitutional republic. Agencies are supposed to follow the law, not twist it to fit their agenda. They're supposed to respect the limits on their power, not constantly test how far they can push. And when they cross the line, the courts are supposed to rein them in. That's exactly what's happening in this case. And it's exactly why it matters so much. So keep your eyes on this case, follow the updates. Pay attention to what the court decides. And support the organizations like Gun Owners of America that are doing the hard work of fighting these battles in court. Because at the end of the day, your rights are only as secure as your willingness to defend them. The Second Amendment doesn't protect itself. It takes constant vigilance, constant effort, and constant pushback against government overreach. This pistol brace case is just one battle in a much larger war, and the outcome will shape the future of gun rights in America for years to come. Before I wrap this up, I want to ask you one more time to hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel and share this video with everyone you know who cares about the Second Amendment. The algorithms don't always show this kind of content to people, so sharing it directly makes a huge difference. And if you want to support the channel even more, check out the links in the description. Every bit of support helps me keep bringing you this kind of in-depth analysis and breaking news on the issues that matter most to gun owners. All right, that's everything I've got for you today. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and I'll see you in the next video.